welcome to our show. I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
And today we are going to have a fabulous webinar talking about after-death communication and joyful contacts by deceased loved ones with Bill Guggenheim. And I want to remind you that this webinar is brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation as well as the Compassionate Friends. Well, Heidi, exciting. Do you want to introduce Bill?
Sure, I'll introduce him a little and then I'm going to turn it over to him and ask him a little more about himself. But Bill is a pioneer in the field. He is a leader in the field of after-death communication. He's been doing this for nearly 30 years. He has a best-selling book called Hello from Heaven, and he is an incredible presenter, and he speaks all over the country and has spoken, I think, all over the world. And we are very, very fortunate to have him on today. Hi, Bill. Welcome.
Hi, Heidi. Hello.
Hi. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thank you, Gloria. Hello to you.
So, Bill, tell us a little bit about how you got into this field and about yourself.
I came into it in the most roundabout, I suppose, kicking and screaming way, in a different way, in that I used to be a stockbroker and a securities analyst, literally, on Wall Street. And I didn't believe in life after death or religion or anything like that. But I compared people to flashlight batteries. When the juice ran out, when the body died, you threw it away like a battery. And that was it. Nothing more to talk about. And then I was attending a 5-day workshop many years later with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, where I heard some of these experiences and I was curious about them. And that was in 1977. However, there had never been any books or anything like that published about them. And there was only the interlibrary loan system. So I was able to learn of a book and order it from anywhere in the United States for free from the library system. And I did that. And I learned a lot about these experiences, but I don't have the credentials, I thought, to write or research them in an academic way. So I approached Raymond Moody, who had written the book Life After Life and was best known for near-death experiences. And Raymond took many years. He never said no to the idea of collaborating, but he never said yes. And that put me into limbo until one day a voice in my head said, Bill, do your own research, write your own book. It's your spiritual work to do.
Yeah,
with that, I called my former wife, Judy. We'd been married 17 years and we're divorced for 4 years. I invited her over to discuss the idea. And as we were just sitting there, a woman called me and told me a phenomenal experience of after-death communication that was very evidential. And that sort of cemented the deal. And we began shortly afterwards on 7 years of research and writing for our book, Hello from Heaven.
Wow, fantastic. And I remember reading Hello from Heaven, Bill. It blew my mind. And so many people were so excited about that book. What was the first year it came out?
We self-published it in 1995. We very optimistically ordered 5,000 copies, but we had them distributed within less than a year. Wow. And we had a contract with Bantam Books within 2 months.
Wow.
A literary agent who didn't have to sell it. She just carried it with her and people said, what are you working on? And she took it out of her backpack and showed it and said, oh, I'm interested. We had a bidding war and in 2 months we had a contract.
Okay.
Which is one of these miracle stories in publishing.
I remember reading it. Everyone was reading it. An amazing book. Well, let's get on. I know we've already got questions and people want to know about this idea of after-death communication. And tell us who this picture is of.
That's my daughter, Jaenet. Jaenet was 47 years old. She looks, actually, she was only 46 in this picture, but she has
Lovely.
a very young looking face and everything. But ever since she was a little girl, she was different. She was one of those kids who was a member of Mensa because she could do theoretical mathematics. She could draw, she could paint, she could do what 3 or 4 or 5 adults could not do, but she could do it all. But she had mood swings that went undiagnosed. And unfortunately for her, she was on a bunch of antidepressants and met a man who convinced her to go cold turkey on them.
Wow.
All of them at once. And for some reason, she listened to him. She did talk to her older sister, Mary, and said, I think I may start taking these pills again. But for some reason, and this is where I do get angry politically, even though I'm not an activist. She lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and was able to go into a Walmart store, buy a handgun right there, pick it up, bring it home, and use it on herself 2 hours later.
Oh my goodness.
That was a snap decision. I'm sure if there had been a 3-day or 5-day or 7-day waiting period, she would have either gone back on the drugs or something else would have occurred. But it was a snap decision. On the other hand, she had attempted suicide 2 or 3 times before this.
Now, how long ago was that?
This was in 2011. So
here you are. You've been in after-death communication. How many years?
Since, it depends on how you count it, 1977 or 1988, depending on where you begin, but many years.
So you've been in that. So what was your, of course, as any parent having that kind of tragedy, you know, there are all sorts of things that you have gone through that we could be talking about on another show. But let's talk specifically about what was your thought as a person who had been studying this, and how did you approach your daughter's death?
Initially, I was just as shocked as any other father would be, and numb. And I was angry because the police came to my home at 1:45 in the morning, and one of them made a statement that led me to believe she was okay when she wasn't. And I live in Florida. Her mother lives in Santa Fe as well, but she left a message for them to contact me. And I didn't want to call her mother. We had been divorced many, many years. We were good friends, but you don't want to call somebody in the night and tell them that. But the police do that. That's their job as far as I was concerned. But the good thing is, Jaenet and I had always had a very good communications. We didn't see each other that often, but by both telephone and by email. And now it was by telepathy after she died. I didn't hear from her directly. I heard from some caretakers of her at first. And shortly thereafter, though, I began hearing from her.
Wow. And let's get on to that a little bit later on. Let's start with the basics, and then I know people are going to want to know what your first contact was with her. So we'll talk about after-death communication.
Okay, well, what is the definition of an ADC? An after-death communication, or an ADC, is a spiritual experience that occurs when a person is contacted directly and spontaneously by a family member or a friend who has died. It's a direct experience because no third parties are involved. There are no psychics, mediums, therapists, hypnotists, rituals, or devices that are involved with this. And an ADC is a spontaneous event because our deceased ones always choose when, where, and how they will contact us. Meaning we may want them to come to us. We can ask them to, we can do some other things for that, but we can't make it happen. We can want it to happen, but it's not something we can control. And ADCs can happen anytime and anywhere. And that just is a matter of being open to having it occur.
So what's a typical message then?
Well, there are many different messages. The most typical ones are that I'm okay, don't worry about me, and go on with your own life.
You know, that's interesting because I think most people I've talked to that are bereaved parents or bereaved siblings, their number one thing, and I don't know if the world realizes it, is, are you okay? Are they okay? That's the initial thing that comes up. Are they okay? Has that been your experience, Heidi?
I found that there are 2 parts of grief. First of all, the death of anyone we love, whether it's a child, a spouse, a parent, whoever. I call it an emotional amputation. It's just as though an arm or a leg or some other part of us is just amputated. Something's missing. Not only just a phantom limb. I mean, it's much more than that. It's real. And we mourn that, we grieve that, and we wonder, how are they? Do they still, first of all, in our culture, do they still exist? Is there a life after death, or a heaven, or a hell, or this or that? And the other part is that sense of something not being there, just the presence of somebody.
I was saying to somebody once, it was a friend of mine, Byron Katie, who does the work and works with how do we know somebody should have died because they did, and that kind of thing. And I said to Katie, but Katie, you don't get it. There's an empty bed at night when you go to tuck them in. I mean, you have to deal with that. They're missing those activities, those day-to-day, daily activities that you had with that person, and you have to deal with it. They're not there for that.
It's my everyday minutia. It's just sharing a song on a radio or sitting together and looking at a sunset. Whether you're, depending on the relationship, holding hands with a person or not. It's the small things that become the most poignant.
Picking up the phone to call them and realizing that you can't.
That's yes. Mm-hmm.
Here's a comment that someone has made, says, "Oh, it's so true about it's like an amputation. I lost both my parents, my mom first, then dad a year later, both unexpected. I want to connect with them." So I hope that we will be able to help you. Bill will give you some ideas about connecting with them today, and thanks for that question.
Some of more of the messages from them. Now, some of these are stated verbally, others are implied, so it may be either way. And that they're saying, "I'm happy. Don't worry about me. Don't grieve for me. Everything will be all right. Go on with your own life." And so they're saying we don't have to be concerned about them. Our grief is our missing of them. The empty place next to us. The empty place at the table, that's probably the most poignant. Because that's 2 or 3 times a day for meals and all the special holidays. Sometimes they'll say, "I'm sorry," if like a suicide or something, but they'll say, "Please forgive." That's a special category. But parents have been asked to forgive someone who murdered their child. And it's to help the parent release those feelings. And it's a beautiful story when you hear something like that. They'll say, "Thank you. I'll always be there for you. I'm watching over you." That's more of a guardian angel kind of relationship. That's more of a husband and wife type of relationship, or parent, somebody older with somebody younger. But it could be a child. Sometimes the children are bringing up the parents.
Right. You know, I got to stop for a minute when you mentioned suicide, because you talked about your daughter did take her own life. How do you deal with that? I really find that parents who I see when I'm a compassionate friends or whatever, there's a certain amount of anger at their child for doing this.
There are 2 parts of suicide that I found a 3rd part. The ones I know about. And by the way, the very best book I've ever read on that is Iris Bolton's book. I just went blank on the title. It'll come back to me. Anyway, you'll find that at Iris Bolton. And that is feeling guilt that we didn't prevent it. That's the number 1 emotion. I didn't stop it. I wasn't there for the person. I didn't hear them. I didn't listen. I didn't intervene. The other is anger at the person who took their life. Because if they hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have to feel this way.
Right.
I'm feeling angry because I feel so sad and upset, and my life's so misshapen and yucky because you did this. But there's a 3rd thing I'm finding, and that's by having attended a number of suicide support groups, both which I did academically while doing the book, just to learn about it, and secondly, just for my own sake after my daughter took her life. I believe, and I can't prove this statistically or anything, I think some of the people are there because they feel they need to feel guilty. They need to go on feeling guilty that their child, or whoever it is, friend, spouse, died. And they lock themselves into it. And
you think that the guilt is a way that they think the guilt is a way to keep a connection with the child?
That they deserve to feel guilty. It's like a punishment self-imposed by God, but on them, or on themselves in some way. I can't explain fully what I mean, unfortunately, but it's like I shouldn't get well, I shouldn't get over this, I shouldn't be healed, I shouldn't be cured, I shouldn't graduate from this support group, I should stay in it, and of course, make a cause out of it and things like that. I've heard a lot of this language that I think people who are more academic.
We have a couple of questions coming in, a bunch of them. One from Julie, who asks, "Do you believe there are people who can communicate with the dead, like mediums? I visited one after the death of my sister, and I still don't know what to believe."
I will not comment on mediumship. I think there are some who are very, very good and trustworthy and reputable. John Edward is one. I studied with another woman from many years ago. Suzanne Giesman seems to be one who's coming to the Helping Parents Heal One conference. but it's not part of our research. Unfortunately, I don't have to be an expert on that.
Yeah, one of the things that I'd like to say about, just comment on this, is that the really cool thing about having Bill on the show today is he's not a medium. And he's here to say you can do it yourself, which I absolutely, think is great. So Julie, listen in on this, and I think maybe you'll figure out some ways that you can connect on your own. And you were talking, Bill, about guilt keeping them alive. And we had somebody write in and say, yes, guilt keeps them alive. We feel connected. Healthy, no. So this is a person who's had a suicide that says, yeah, I'm connected with this. I know it's not healthy, but it does. But I think just recognizing it and verbalizing it
Absolutely.
releases some of that tension. I think whoever emailed this in, you're going to feel less tension after this show in relation, just because you put it out there.
Well, Mom, and what you and I have seen a lot of, and I think Bill's seen it probably too. Sometimes we hold on to the pain longer than we need to because we feel that the pain represents the connection.
Mm-hmm.
And really the pain doesn't really represent the connection. I mean, Scott lived a very vibrant life. So I feel like when I'm living my best life, I'm more connected to him than when I'm in pain. When I'm in pain, all I'm doing is connecting with the way that he died, the death, not the way he lived.
If you get into some of the experiences that I've heard in our research and read other books as well, you get the feeling that they don't want us to be down in that black pit of despair. Mm-hmm. And guilt and all these negative feelings, because we're sending that out to them and pulling them back, and they want us to let go of that for their and it's like a magnetic pull.
Yeah.
And they're pulled back. They want to help us, they want to heal us because they love us. And just like if somebody you love, you reach out to them to help them, but after a while, it's a little bit harder and harder because they keep rejecting you too. And I'm speaking now just in human terms. And so often I've run into people who wanted their child to keep coming back. In other words, people having one after-death communication experience is wonderful, 3, 5, 10, 15, but they'll get to a number, they'll say, stop, enough is enough. I have to go on with my new life.
Wow, that's interesting.
If there's a reason, I will come back to you, but stop pulling me back.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to this last comment where on our slide. Are all after-death communications experience or ADCs positive, or are some of them negative or frightening?
I've never come across any that are frightening or negative in the content of them. However, the way the people interpret them. For instance, let's just say you're sitting there, and this is in the book. We have a sub-chapter on that in Hello from Heaven, and that is, one woman was watching her child fully appear to her. Well, she was unprepared for this, totally. It shocked her, it scared her, and said, stop, pulled away, and immediately the child stopped. So there are various ways, because of religion especially, and I'm not going to throw any stones at any religions, but the belief is, the misunderstanding is that we're conjuring the spirits of our children, or whoever it is, back. We're not. We're allowing them to come back. They choose to come back. All we have to do is be open to it. And we're not, we may want it to happen, but we can't make it happen. And in the Bible, in Corinthians, there are the 9 gifts of the Holy Spirit, one of which is the discernment of spirits. It doesn't say only evil spirits. It just says discernment of spirits. And if I go a step further, the most famous ADCs in history are the appearances Jesus made following the crucifixion. It's well known, and up to Mary of Magdala afterwards, and the apostles on up to 500 people. And I think that was a large part of the initial attraction of Christianity at that time, was the fact that he was able to show himself afterwards, and part of his own mission.
Right.
And so you have all that. And then
we've got another question here. Mary McGuire asks, have had smells ADCs. What do you think about smells?
Oh yeah, we have a whole chapter on that. When I say whatever type we have a whole chapter in Hello from Heaven, which is at least 15 firsthand accounts.
And here's somebody else. Sonia says, my daughter passed away of a lymphoma November 5th, 2016. Oh, we're sorry about that, Sonia. I have not had any visits from her. I miss her every day, and I'm told that they visit in your dreams.
In your dreams?
Mhm.
Yes, that's another form. That's a very common form of communication. The most common forms, I think, are just feeling the presence. And that's usually in the days and weeks immediately following their transition. But however, in our culture, we're taught not to believe that those are real. They're just fantasies that we're having because we're thinking about them. We're getting ready for their funeral or the immediate events of their death and decisions and all that.
Well, Bill, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. You've talked a lot about staying open, and I know Sonia hasn't had any visitations or anything like that. So how do we stay more open so that we can feel connected more to those people that we love?
There are two main reasons, and then I'll go into why. The first one is to ask. Asking is a form of prayer. Ask your deceased loved one, your child, your parent, your whoever it may be, to come to you, that you need to hear from them, know they're okay. Just ask them to visit you while you're awake or asleep, whatever is most comfortable to you. And then let go and see what happens. The second one is to learn how to meditate. Now, this may sound contradictory, and I don't mean going Eastern and you don't have to study yoga and do all those, transcendental meditation and spend thousands of dollars either. But we in the West are so trained to believe in science that we don't have these experiences compared to Central America, South America, parts of Europe and the Philippines and whatnot, where these people typically would need our book there. They have the experience at night. They share them with their friends the next day. It's open, easy, very elaborate.
Well, Bill, and to go a step further than that, since I'm a psychologist, sometimes we pathologize people that talk about the fact that they are connected or they've, seen things or heard things or smelled things.
Yeah, which is our next slide, Heather. Let's go to that. Skeptics and cynics and agnostics. Before we do that, I wanted to go to Basha said, I agree with you, Heidi. When I live in my best life, I feel like I've honored Richard. Thank you.
I love that, Basha.
Very sweet. Holly says, my daughter Heather died in a sudden death car accident with five others, 3 in the same car. Wow, 5 kids died together. Whoa. 2 months later, I received a strange phone call, static, and her voice sounded identical. She said, well, I think I'm going to get teary. She said, we're here then, said my favorite belief word, hope. Is it possible a cell phone can send spirit?
We have a chapter on telephone ADCs. And here we meant regular phones, but also cell phones. And people if you're asleep and you hear a phone ring, you pick it up and you answer when you have a conversation. You kind of accept that. But what if you're just in the kitchen or you're cooking or cleaning or whatever you're doing, right, or at your desk at work, and the phone rings, you pick it up and you hear the voice of the one who died.
And she heard static and heard hope.
And sometimes it's absolutely clear, no static. It's absolutely clear. You have 1 or 2-way communication. Gradually their voice fades and finally it ends. And at the end, there's no dial tone, no hang up, no disconnect. It's just over. And that's a whole category. And one man who wrote an entire book on this one type of ADC called phone calls from the dead. All these are major kinds. These experiences are extremely common. They're 5 to 10 times more common than near-death experiences.
So Teresa says, so true, also guilty of laughing in life. I can't be happy anymore, no matter how hard I try. I lost my son 10 years ago, and I'm emotionally amputated and changed. I am not the same person since his passing. It's impossible to be. Oh my goodness, Teresa, no, you will never be the same person you were. I believe there's a huge opportunity for personal growth through tragedy. I'm in a program at Stanford right now, working with meditation, and that's something, as Bill said, that you might want to take a look at. It's been 10 years that you might want to look into some meditation and look into yourself, because as I said, the expectation that we won't be changed, life changes us. Mm-hmm. So good luck on that, Teresa.
We can't go back. We go forward in life. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it's going to be different than it was before. And one of the things I read, which really had a profound effect upon me, is the death of a child rips our heart open. of course. We understand that. But there's a purpose to it. And one thing that those who work it through, and many leaders of DCF and other bereavement support groups have gone through this process and emerged much stronger, much healthier later. And that is because they've worked through their grief and found this is just one lifetime. This isn't all there is. This is one frame of a infinitely long movie almost. And by realizing this, and we can having communication with our deceased loved ones, plural, that we just move on. It's,
right. Teresa, I would suggest to anybody who's listening to this show, if you are suffering the loss, and if it happens to be of a child, you can join up with the Compassionate Friends. You can go to Open to Hope website. If it's a spouse, you can go to Soaring Spirits Foundation. You should check with your local hospice. You can check with your local hospitals and find groups, because coming together in groups can be very healing. And I know there are people suffering after 10 years and questioning that, watching this, and I'm saying, reach out, get help, get community, because this universal loss and healing is a universal process, and you'll find other people who have found hope, and they'll help you tap into your own. But we've got another question, which I think is really interesting, because the one person says that the preacher said rest in peace, and she didn't like that because she thought people should be more active. But then the next person comes on and says, I found rest in peace comforting. So Bill, isn't it true? One person likes something and the other person doesn't. It works for them. It doesn't work for others.
That's why there's more than one of us here.
Right.
That's why we paint our home. You go through a subdivision and every house is decorated differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's another one, which I think is really current right now. It's talking about a heroin overdose. A 26-year-old son died of a heroin overdose 2 years ago. I haven't heard from him and asked him to contact me. I've expressed forgiveness to him, but somehow feel he is angry at me, refusing to contact me. Do you have any suggestions?
I think she's assuming the son is angry. The son might not be able yet, may not be aware that he can do so. Maybe she is not open to a very large category, and this is where a lot of books are being written right now, are about signs and symbols. And almost anything can be a sign. Seeing a rainbow, seeing butterflies, birds, you name it, finding pennies, quarters, dimes, whatever.
We find dimes. Yeah.
Okay. On and on and on. If you read about these, you'll see, and if you ask for this kind of a sign to let you know you still exist, that you're okay, you sort of begin opening up. It's just that we're so closed as a society to the possibility, because the skeptics, cynics, agnostics, and atheists have told us this is all there is. There's nothing more. They don't exist. And we're fighting all that training we've had, all the schooling. The more schooling we have, the more difficult it is. For instance, the Mormon religion is wide open to ADCs because their religion is founded upon revelation. And I was at a book conference years ago, and people came up to me once they knew what kind of book I'd written and told me story after story after story. You know, I could have done the research in half the time and had mind-blowing experiences in it that were evidential. And the Native Americans have these on a regular basis, and other peoples who are not as formally educated, because it's like we've educated this out of people rather than into people. We're doing the undoing. We're doing the reverse now with a show like this.
Right. Well, this, you know, you're talking about finding, I was saying we find dimes, and Scott died in 1983, and our grandkids even find them in weird places. So because the reason I bring that up, because Mary said, is there a time limit on ADCs? Mike died in 2014. I'd say absolutely none. When you had it, what we get.
No, they go, the longest we have in the book is 33 years later. And a woman was warned that a tree was about to fall on her house. So she got out of the bedroom, and sure enough, here in Florida, a big tree crashed right through her bedroom.
Your dog's liking this whole thing.
I was going to say that too. Bill, that could be a sign of some kind, because your dog is definitely responding to that.
Well, it could be. Won't say no.
You know, Evelyn did us some things about her husband had a dream that the cat was eating the flowers, and when they got up, it actually was. And they find safety pins in the oddest places, quite often on holidays. So really sweet. Brian says, I was scared after my parents' death. They protected me and made me feel secure. I kept seeing geese. Someone said, look it up online, and it said geese represent security and protection. I was blown away. Could it be? Question mark.
That's amazing.
Geese are one of at least more than 25 species of birds that I've heard of. And it's not just seeing a bird in the sky. I'm talking about having a bird come and land next to you and stay with you, whether it's a chickadee. The most common one is a red cardinal.
Yes.
Any kind of bird.
The red cardinal is always visiting my husband, whose father died, and he happens to be a Cardinals fan too. But it's constantly coming and landing near him all the time. It's interesting.
They'll come and peck on the windows and things
Yes.
like this. It's the unusual behavior.
Yeah.
Again, in Hello from Heaven, we have a chapter on this, and we have like in one case, they're going out on a boat to scatter the ashes of the sun. And because this boy was really in love with the ocean or the Gulf and animals, a whole number of porpoises swam out with a boat and waited till the ashes had been scattered, and then as they were, the porpoises took off and they went back to shore.
Wow.
Let's get to this skeptics and cynics, because I know there are a lot of skeptics and cynics out there that are going to tell you that your experience, you know, wasn't the correct one, or you know, I don't know.
Well, Mom, we get it.
Yeah, what do you say?
Whenever we find dimes, sometimes people laugh.
Yeah, and we find them in really weird places that, you know, like on paths for golf carts and in seats in a cab in New York. People are skeptical about it.
I'm going to get him some dog biscuits.
Okay, we'll talk for a minute. Well, Heidi, while he's getting the dog biscuits, let's talk a little bit about the next one. My son was a homicide-suicide. He committed the homicide prior to suicide. Wow. Difficult to process. Want to think he's okay. Wow, that is heavy.
I think it's totally understandable. Like Bill said, we want to know that they're okay. So Bill, we just got another one about from Mary. Her son was a homicide-suicide. He committed the homicide prior to the suicide, and she wants to think he's okay. So what would you tell Mary?
I'd say that's a double one because of all the guilt regarding a homicide, as well as the other feelings too. I don't think I've come across that before, to be honest with you. But
we actually did a radio show. If you want to go online and look at homicide suicide, go to opentohope.com. And the lady wrote a book about it. I can't give her name right now. It was a couple of years ago, but you can Google that and get some ideas about how you can process it. You know, don't you think, Bill, sometimes you have to process it here before you can ask?
I think that sometimes seeking out a very good therapist, especially one who does EMDR.
Yes, good advice, Bill.
And who will work with you one-to-one at a rate that you can afford. And you can find these online and you know, or call the local hospice. They're the ones that know what's going on.
It's called rapid desensitization, and you can have amazing things happen in a couple of sessions if you've got trauma.
I love that, Bill. I worked with the fire department after 9/11, and I worked with a couple of firefighters, and it just wasn't helpful until they did EMDR with somebody, and that really helped them a lot. So that's good advice for Mary.
Okay, let's hurry with this skeptic one because we got to move on here. But what about the skeptics and cynics and agnostics and atheists, Bill?
My thing is, I don't try to convert anybody. I mean, it's like if somebody comes to my door and says, "Hello, I'm sorry, no sale." It's the same thing in reverse. I had one heckler once in a workshop out of all the ones I've given. I said, "Can we just wait till after the workshop? I'll spend as much time with you as you'd like." And we did, we spoke, and he was fine afterwards. But there's no sense going on with them. Generally, they don't sit down and write long articles. They just don't believe it. So, and some of them are trying to save us from what they think is demonic possession, things like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Very much.
And sometimes I just, if somebody's skeptical enough, you just don't tell them anymore, because I just consider some of these these experiences are sacred. And I find out sometimes kids won't tell you about it. They'll tell you about something that happened once or twice, and they won't tell you again. I think because their experiences. So, you know, sometimes you just want to keep them in your own heart, and maybe journal too. That's fun.
Don't we do the same? I mean, we try to share something with somebody, whether it's a parent or a sibling or a child, and they look at us like we're really from another planet.
Right.
And
Or
sometimes
worse.
kids have a lot of kids are very open. My kids have had incredible experiences.
Now let's go to the next slide. And Bill, you're just going to mention on this slide how people can get your how people can get these. We don't have time to talk about the 12 major types of after-death communication, but you've got a great handout for them, right?
Yes, whenever I give a workshop, I have a 4-page handout that I give out. It's printed on all 4 sides. And I'm going to send this to Heather. And if you go to opentohope@me.com in a day or so, you'll be able to download these 4 pages. And they say everything I say during a workshop. That's why nobody ever has to take any notes or anything like that.
Okay, so we've kind of talked about some of the types. So let's go on to the next slide and let's answer some of these questions. We're coming up with a lot. Opening up is like a sixth sense that I discovered I had after my son passed. You see things and feel things you never had before. My son comes to me in dragonflies, dimes all the time. It makes me feel good. Well, thank you for that, Teresa. That's some great ideas. And Marta says, it's hard. My son died by suicide, and I feel like he may not want to come to me. He has come to others, his grandma and friends. It will be 2 years in November. Is he mad at me? Or I have also heard they can't come through if your grief is too deep. Could this be my problem?
Grief is a big one because if you could see it as it is, it's like a gray cloud around us. Mm-hmm. And when we see other human beings, we sort of get a sense of where they're at. And if somebody looks very angry, well, we tend to pull away. I mean, maybe you don't because you're a psychologist, but the average person pulls away. And same thing with grief. Most people don't feel comfortable with people who are grieving. They don't know what to say. And you hear about all these well-meaning phrases that they say to grieved parents, but they're all the wrong ones and whatnot. So it's as far as a son not coming to the woman, I have no idea. I'm not going to guess.
Again, if she's feeling, Teresa's feeling that she may have too much emotion, that may be an indication to you that you do need to get some help, as Bill suggested, and work this thing through, through a little more, and maybe that will come up for you. So Teresa wants to know, is it possible to hallucinate, or was it a miracle? Coming home from my son's funeral last night, we saw 2 sets of footsteps in the snow, and it became one, like that famous quote you see, and I stopped the car and then stepped out of the car, and they disappeared. Is it possible great loss and grief can make you hallucinate?
Obviously I can't say no, it doesn't, but I think that we have transcendent experiences that aren't logical or reasonable according to what we know about science. And trust what makes us feel good. Just if you have a message of love and it uplifts you, trust it.
Yeah, I love the footsteps in the snow. I think it's amazing. I mean, just love it when you get something that comes up, a sign on a store or something. I remember seeing just a sign that said Safeway one day and thinking, I need to take the Safeway.
Okay.
So
there are little messages around us all the time.
Exactly. And you can play with them and have fun with them.
Yes.
And I think what you focus on grows. So if you start noticing things, make a conscious effort to start noticing, like you said, Bill, everything around you.
Yes.
Someone just asked for the handout contact again. Just go to opentohope@me.com. opentohope@me.com, or you can just go to our website, Open to Hope, and contact us. Open to Hope and contact us.
A lot of people are talking about what they see. Brian sees geese, and Evelyn sees butterflies that land on her. And Amy has a question then she asks, can our loved ones tell us what the afterlife is like?
I'm reading a book right now called The After Death Diary of Princess Diana.
Oh, wow.
Diana of Wales. I've read a number of books. They're not necessarily by our individual children. although some people do get information from their child or children or others. But there are a number of books out there that describe the afterlife. The best known one right now is the afterlife of Billy Fingers.
Yes, I've read it. It's good.
Yeah,
And,
she's one of our Open to Hope authors.
Yeah. Annie
and so Annie Kagan's book is a marvelous selling book from the beginning, and she's promoted it very well, and it's still selling very well at Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill, we've got one about suicide again, and I thought this might be one where you might want to connect in with your daughter for them a little bit, where they say, when contacted by a child who died by suicide, do they ever tell you why they did it? Did your daughter ever?
Actually, she doesn't want to discuss it. She was very emotional here on Earth. She would be very black and white. Yes, I want to discuss that. I'm open to discussing that, or stop. And she just cut me off. And that was her personality. She was very controlling in a way. And I offered, would she be interested in writing a book with me, because I can receive her messages and whatnot. No, she's not. That's not her thing. But what she is doing is working with children with art. She was an artist herself, amongst other things. And she's working with children with, I can't even begin to describe it, but it's three-dimensional, and they manufacture it with your mind, and you keep making these images larger and larger. They fill the sky with color and movement and dance, like kites in a way, but more than 100 kites. And that's what I saw last.
Now, tell me, how do you, for those that are watching this, how do you contact her? What do you do? I mean, do you have a certain place you sit? Do you have material you put in front of you? Do you have a time of day? You know, what's the deal?
You're like asking a great football player, how does he score touchdowns?
Exactly. Come on, Bill. Give us your secret.
I don't have. For me, it's just something I've been able to do. I was by telepathy with her and with some other people. And it just happens. And one time the song I related to Jaenet was Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles, by George Harrison. And I always thought, whenever I heard the song, I sent her energy, that she needed energy throughout her life. And then when her mother built a beautiful, beautiful website for her name is Jaenet, Jaenet, Jaenet net. That the song is played there. But when I read the letters that others had posted on there, I saw how she had been the sun to so many other people. So even somebody who looks like a wounded duck or bird or animal or whatever was not necessarily that person at all, except in our relationship. She was there to help other people in many ways throughout their lives. Again, she was 47, not 14.
So Bill, it sounds like she probably helped you in many ways, in ways that you didn't even know.
That's true too, yes.
Yep. Heidi, I'm thinking of Here Comes the Sun, because after your brother died, you went on Outward Bound, a few months after, and your song was Here Comes the Sun, got you going through the whole program, right?
My song got me going through the whole program?
Here Comes the Sun. I remember you singing it to me after.
Yes, it did, absolutely. And I felt very, very connected with my brother on that program. And he had gone the year before, and being out in nature and out in Colorado in those mountains, I was very connected with him.
Anyway, when I was playing that song, right here in front of my third eye, as they call it, I saw an image of her. She was turning in a circle and then dancing in a larger circle. So she was twirling and dancing and showing me how free she was and how happy she was. This was not right away. This was a few years later, but I got it. And that's who she is to me. And I'm not sitting here filled with guilt or shame or blame at all. And I've helped her mother a certain amount. But her mother doesn't believe in any of this and is locked into it, unfortunately. But
well, it's so interesting, Bill, because I've met you and I know you, and you're this buttoned up in all the best ways business guy that used to be an atheist, and now you're in a space where you're talking about these kind of things. I mean, it's interesting, the transformation, and I love it. Because, you know, you're saying this is possible. This isn't crazy and wacko and weird. This is possible.
So we've got a question here that's fitting into this slide, Bill, which is everyone okay after death? But can someone who's grieving want to connect too much? to the point where their loved one will not come to them. I suppose some who tell me they've asked for and asked for a loved one to come back and they're disappointed. And then and another one fits in is, how can I develop my ability to communicate with my daughter, which fits into this also.
Well, again, we said learn how to meditate or ask for a sign or ask them to come back in some form. So asking is a form of being open. You're declaring I'm open and I'm ready. But then recognize what you get and don't say it's not enough. I want more, because people get into that game. But
Bill, is everyone okay? Like Mary asks, is everyone okay after death? Or
I can't answer that. I mean, I think about what happened in the Nazis and everything in Germany, and not so much the prisoners who were killed, but the ones who did it. I keep wondering about them. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, well, let's go on to the next one. What have you learned from the research you conducted on all the thousands of after-death communications occurred during the past 25 years? You're going to
I love this question. I love this question because I have an answer to it. I'd like to talk about. And this comes out of the ones that are out-of-body ADCs. Some people are able to leave their physical body at nighttime or daytime, whatever, and visit their deceased loved one in the same home, nearby physically, just a few miles away, hundreds of miles away, or actually they go to that level of existence where our deceased loved ones are. Call it heaven, call it the afterlife, call it nirvana, whatever you want to. The labels aren't important. But here's what I've come to believe and what I talk about. And I say that in reality, each of us here and now is a spirit or a soul who is wearing a physical body. It is our earth suit. We need this suit to function. If I don't have it, you can't see me. I can't write with a pen. I can't use a computer. I can't drive a car. I can't travel. Nothing. Well, I could do it, but not physically. And I'd be invisible. I'd be, quote, a ghost, as we call it. And so we need to have this physical body to operate at this level of reality called physical life. That's all. And it's like our suit, or it's like our spacesuit for astronaut who's outside the capsule in space and working on the spacecraft. But at some point, this body can only take so much abuse, whether it's an accident, an illness, or some other form of harm to the spacesuit. It will break down. It will cease to function. It dies. But the only thing that dies is not I, not you, not the I that each of us is. But the physical body dies. The only thing we bury is the physical body. And I say bury or cremate, or if it's blown up on a battlefield, that's all that ceases to exist. The essential I that each of us is continues to exist. And we come here into life to learn spiritual lessons, to learn some, to teach some, to share some. It's very much, my favorite analogy is of a repertory theater group. Maybe 25, 30 people who put on a different play every week. And we take different roles, different relationships. And every week we put on a different play. Some has a few people, some has many people. And the play's over in a week because we put on another one. That's a lifetime. And that we choose these different relationships that we have. The parents, the siblings, the spouse, the children, all these different things. And we have all these experiences, the pain, the joy, the best of the best and the worst of the worst. But that's all it is. And then we leave here and we say, wow, that was so real. So real.
Bill, I love this. So I have a question from Carla. I'm curious about how reincarnation affects the link to our loved ones and our ability to connect with them.
That didn't come up in our research. We had 2 or 3 people speak about reincarnation, but those are people who already believed in it and wanted to promote it. But it's not in our book, Hello from Heaven, at all.
Well,
yeah.
I think the idea of wearing this suit is so comforting, don't you, Mom?
I do. But however, I've got a statement from Susan here. She says, Bill, I love you. I love this workshop. I love your whole idea, but I am in so much pain after 1 year. Help, will I feel better?
Mm-hmm. The first year, I mean, it's a cliche, the first year is the hardest year. if you will go and be with other parents. Here's how healing occurs the fastest that I know of. And that's why I've been the presenter of 15 national conferences of the Compassionate Friends and so many regionals and chapters, because I like being there long before my daughter died. It's not because of that. What I see there is love, LOVE in block letters. And I see this at all these other bereavement support groups. And I went to them while we were doing our research to learn about them, as well as to find people to interview. And what I see is that the more we reach out to help other people, and it doesn't have to be somebody who died. It could be somebody who's hungry, somebody who's homeless, somebody who's needs a friend to talk to, whatever it is. It could be in a small, small way or a huge way. It's about love. That's how we heal. And my favorite image of the Compassionate Friends, I wish I had thought of it on my own, but it's not original, is I heard this, that those who have been in there longer and the ones who are the regional coordinators and whatnot, they're reaching forward with one hand for help from those who have been in the TCF or other groups longer and receiving their help. And they're reaching backwards with the other hand to help those who are newer and coming behind them. And as we are part of that endless daisy chain of life, truly there to help and serve others, that's when we heal. That's when we find meaning to life. And from emptiness and loneliness. Because the one word is so seldom used about all this grief is emptiness. That's what most people feel. It's not just depression. It's emptiness, no purpose in their life any longer.
And so helping others. I think early on we were talking about the first year. May I say that letting other people serve you that first year is an honor for them to be able to serve you. People want to feel good and serve. And as you get a little further down the road, you'll be able to serve people. Somebody just commented on Darcy Sims, who was a wonderful friend of Compassionate Friends. She died not too long ago. And it's from Susan. And Susan says, it's important to remember, like Darcy Sims told me years ago, that letting go of pain doesn't mean letting go of the love, not ever. This is an important turning point in my grief journey when I finally accepted that. Very sweet, Susan.
Darcy was the best therapist, healer, all these things and more that I can think of that I've ever met.
Yeah, she was amazing.
I have been in a workshop with her whereby she had people in there walking into their first national conference whose child died less than 6 months ago. And frankly, I don't mean as making fun of anybody. They were literally walking zombies. They didn't know where they were, what they were doing. And when they came to her workshop, just briefly for 10 or 15 seconds, she got them to laugh.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Bill, we have done
all within 50 minutes.
We have done a lot of cable shows with her and a lot of radio shows. So please Google her name and Open to Hope so that you can hear, because even when you're watching these shows, like Bill said, you will laugh, you will cry. She gets it. She understands. She's been that. She's walked the walk and talked the talk. We called her the Mother Teresa of grief and loss. Yes, right?
There's another comment here. Support is so key, but it's hard to ask for it. And if you're not asking, people are reluctant to say something to you because they don't know what to say. I've struggled with getting support. I think that there are, frankly, people who are good grief support and people who are not quite as good grief. And you've got to find those safe people who can support you.
I find the most aware people as a group are calling a hospice. After my mother died in 2004, I went to a hospice group, and there was a young woman there under 30, and I'm considerably beyond that. And she took a group of people, most of whom were widows, about 10 of us. And okay, 20 minutes later, okay, close your eyes. And now you're going to see your deceased loved one is going to be right here with you and have a conversation and talk to them, blah, 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 blah. No big intro, no big philosophy. She just did it. And she had the consciousness to do it. And I've met so many other wonderful hospice people. So please call hospice. And,
have you had a visit from your mother? Roge has said, lost my son 2013, my husband in 2015, no visits from either of them.
Sometimes you don't need to. I have not heard from, my father died when I was 8 years old, and my mother died just a few years ago. And I've not heard from either one of them, but I didn't need to. And I've heard this many times. One of my favorite children's stories is, it was a mother and father, and the father died. They were married a number of years and were a very close family. And they had 2 grown daughters in their 30s. And they were sure the father would come to one of the 2 daughters. And weeks and months went by, he didn't. And then one night, one of the daughters had a 4-year-old boy over at grandma's, and they fed him dinner and they put him into a guest room to go to bed before they brought him home again. And about half an hour later, the little boy came out and saw his mother and his grandmother and said, "Papa's in the room. Papa's in the room. Grandpa is in my room." It's the 4-year-old child who was having the ADC. And children do have these. We weren't able to put them in the first chapter, but we have all chapter. The first book, we have all chapter of them.
Bill, when my son was little, he used to talk about the fact that his grandfather would come in the room and watch him play.
I see.
It was wonderful.
Yes.
We've got a couple of things about Darcie Sims, and it's DARCIE Sims, SIMS. She's the one we call the Mother Teresa of grief. You can go to Open to Hope and just Google, or you can just put it on the Google bar, Open to Hope Darcie Sims, and you'll get radio shows, television shows. We actually won a national award with a show that she was on at Christmas time. So we're coming into the holidays. That would be a fun one. We'll probably maybe put that up on our website for you. Nicole just made a comment, and thank you, Nicole, for this, because we said the first year was the hardest. She said she's heard the second year is worse, and it's all tough. It's all tough, and everybody's different. It depends on how much you saw the person. There are all sorts of variables connected. But get support, get help, reach out. And Bill, I just love the fact that you're here saying you can do it yourself, and Bill's going to send you this handout that is, how long, Bill? 4 pages?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And also, Bill is going to be at the conference, Elizabeth Boyson's conference, Helping Parents Heal. And that's going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona, April 13th through 15th. Heidi and I are going to be there. We're not going to be presenting, but we're going to be making YouTubes of people like Bill. And we're excited, and Elizabeth's an amazing person. So again, that's helpingparentsheal.org. And you can see Bill there, 13th to the 15th, right, Bill? And then the Compassionate Friends National Conference is going to be in where, Heidi? Heidi's on the national board.
It's going to be in St. Louis in July. I don't have the exact date. It's around the end of July.
The end of July, and you can go to the compassionatefriends.org website to find that. And also, don't forget, you can find chapters, the compassionatefriends.org. You can find chapters for bereaved parents, children, and grandparents. And also, they have open chat rooms, closed chat rooms, I should say, and a lot for siblings, a lot going on. So go to compassionatefriends.org. And also soaringspirits.com is a fabulous place if you lost a spouse. So there are a lot of wonderful resources.
My mom and I are on the advisory board for TAPS, which is
TAPS, yes, the Tragedy Assistance Program, TAPS. Bonnie Carroll's program, that's an amazing program. So anyway, Bill, thank you so much for being on the show. And I love the fact that you're saying we don't have to go to a psychic or whatever. We can receive those signs ourselves. Because, when you go to somebody, I've received signs for 30 years, so what can I say? I'd be broke if I was paying for it.
Bill, people love this webinar. We're getting a lot of feedback right now about how important it was and how great it was. So thank you so much for being here. We're honored to have you here today.
We are, and it sounds like we're going to have him on again next year, Heidi.
Yes, absolutely.
I'd love to. Thank you so much for the opportunity. This is my home. I feel at home with you guys.
I love it.
Somebody said, thank you, keep the webinars coming. Yay. All right, we will do that. And thanks everybody for watching this webinar. Please tell your friends and family about it. You'll be able to access it on our website, opentohope.com. We'll put it up on the front page in a few days.
And in ending, someone just said this was an awesome hour, Bill. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks.
In a way, this is like being with Darcie. That's
Well, Darcie's always with us, I'll tell you that. She's impacted our lives. She was a dear, dear friend.
An amazing woman.
Thank you all for watching, and stay safe and look for those signs, and send us some at opentohope.com and tell us some of the signs that you've seen. We'd love it.
And if you've lost hope, please lean on mine and my mother's and Bill's until you find your own. Thank you.
And God bless.